In the same way, we've bred certain dogs to be extreme in the way that they look. Like your brachycephalic dogs that are very squishy, or your dogs that look a certain way. We've kind of done the same thing with collies, but behaviourally. We have bred them for a very specific, very niche job in a very specific, very niche environment. Now, we're taking those specialised dogs, putting them in pet homes, and then going, oh, why is it not working?
We've learned to spot extreme breeding when we can see it, the squashed face, the breathing. But with collies, it's hidden in their brain. So we call them clever, and we hardly ever look any closer. If your border collie reacts to everything, every car, every jogger, every bit of movement, you've probably wondered what you're doing wrong. But maybe you're not. They might just be built for a life that looks nothing like the one that they've actually got. Ellen Greenwood-Sole, founder of the Urban Herder, has worked with these dogs for more than 10 years. She started with her own dog Jasper, who showed her that normal training had nothing for a brain like his. Once you see what a collie was made for, you stop fighting who they are and you start working with them. Because they don't need fixing, they need somewhere to put all that instinct. This is Just a Dog Podcast, and I'm your host Nadine. Let's begin. Ellen, I'm so glad to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. Are you based in Halifax at the moment still?
Yeah, currently based in Halifax. Do sort of work around a lot of Yorkshire. I travel around the UK doing workshops and things in the summer, but mostly work from Halifax.
How did you start working with dogs? Did you grow up with dogs?
I've always liked animals. I've always loved animals. My family, like my mum's family especially, they came from a farming background, and I always knew I wanted to work with animals, but I wasn't quite sure in what capacity. When I was 13, I got a job as a kennel maid at a local kennels, which was literally just up the road. So I used to walk up there and work there. And then I always wanted to travel as well. And when I was 18, I went and travelled around Asia and lived in Australia. And in Australia, I worked under a couple of fantastic women who I owe my career to, which is Charlotte and Lauren in Perth. And they took me on as a dog walker. And they ran Perth animal training specialists at the time. And they had like a dedicated training unit, which was the first time I'd ever seen or experienced anything. And Charlotte wonderfully took me under her wing and allowed me to come to puppy classes, allowed me to learn more about training. And that's where I kind of really got the bug. And she recommended some courses for me. So while we were traveling, so I went back through Asia, I was sitting on the beaches doing the James O'Hare Companion Animal Science Institute, the Canine Behaviour course. And I used to sit there and type out 1,000-word essays just on the beach, just because I absolutely loved it and I wanted to learn more. But when I came back to Halifax, I knew I wanted to work for myself. I'd worked as a dog walker for 6 months in Oz. So I was like, we'll start with dog walking and hopefully build the business from there. And that's what I did. I then found some trainers in the UK to shadow. I went on to do my degree. And then I got my first dog. So the whole thing was, if we come home, I want a dog. When I worked in the kennels, there was a blue male border collie called Freddie, and he was the love of my life. He was such a nice dog. And I now, his owners now have one of my puppies. So I bred Piper and they ended up getting one. So the reason I got a collie is because of their collie, and they've now got one of my collies, which is kind of a full circle moment. And yeah, so Freddie was the reason I wanted one, and I was adamant I wanted a blue male, and that was all I was going to get. And then I ended up getting Aoife, and Aoife was not what I expected. She had a lot of health issues. She's got no back end, and she was a very poorly dog. So I couldn't do all the things, because as a newbie trainer, you want to do agility, you want to do tricks, you want to be having them doing backflips and handstands and all the fancy stuff that looks really amazing. And with Aoife, I couldn't do any of it because we'd spent all of our time doing physio exercises because she was so broken. And so I was like, I need another dog. But I was adamant I wasn't getting a collie. And then Jasper fell into my lap. I went on holiday and I got given him, essentially. He was about 4 or 5 months old. He was living with a 90-year-old couple, and they weren't coping with him, and they were like, take this dog. So I ended up driving him back from Devon all the way back north. First time I'd ever been in a car. And he came home, and that night I think he bit my husband. And yeah, that's when I was like, wow, okay, this isn't what I was expecting. And then he's the reason I specialise in collies, is because of Jasper, because he was such a difficult dog and such a complex dog. And he was unlike anything I'd ever seen. And I went in there being cocky and thinking I knew everything. And he really taught me I didn't. And I travelled around the UK trying to find other trainers to help me with him because I was like, I don't know what to do with this dog. And kind of the Urban Herder is a culmination of everything that I did with him and everything that worked with him and everything. I realised that actually you do need a slightly different approach with these dogs. They're a highly specialist breed in terms of, in the same way we've bred certain dogs to be extreme in the way that they look. I like your brachycephalic dogs that are very squishy or your dogs that look a certain way. We've kind of done the same thing with collies, but behaviourally. We have bred them for a very specific, very niche job in a very specific, very niche environment. Now we're taking those specialised dogs, putting them in pet homes and then going, why is it not working? So I think we need to start to understand that heritage and understand where they come from and then take some of that into the training that we then do with them. And that's kind of my approach. Underneath it all, we have to understand they are who they are and we can't change that, but we can work with them. And I think sometimes it is a case of like grieving the dog that you wanted, because I had to do it with every dog, apart from Bear and Piper, because I was very savvy with who I got and where I got them from. But with both Ephraim and Jasper, I had to kind of grieve the dogs I thought I was going to have. With Aoife, it was because physically she can't do the stuff that I wanted her to do. Behaviourally, she's fantastic. She's a brilliant little dog. But physically, she can only go like an hour walk. And then if we do anything more than that, we have to medicate her. And she's just limited. And then with Jasper, he was a very complex boy. He was like Chicken Little. The sky was falling. The world was ending. He was a very anxious, very scared dog. And yeah, I had to kind of grieve because I got him thinking I was going to go do backflips and do all this stuff. And it didn't happen. We spent a lot of our time doing behaviour rehabilitation. And I like count my stars that we did that now because my career is where it is. But it is because of him. But again, I think, like I say, it was a big learning curve. And then I haven't had to grieve for Piper and Enzo because I've come into it so much more open of you'll be what you'll be and we'll see where it goes, rather than getting a dog with the intention of you're going to do this or I'm going to do that.
100%. Expectations are half the battle. You get your dog, and your dog isn't a breed. Your dog is an individual, and their history before they arrived, whether that's biologically speaking or what happened to them when they were born, or their key socialization period. There's so many different factors, isn't there, that can influence how your dog responds to the world in general. So if that conflicts with the vision that you had for your life with your dog, it can be really frustrating and heartbreaking. But it sounds like you pivoted quite beautifully, and that's kind of powered an entire career for you, which is incredible.
It's quite difficult because like I get a lot of my clients that come to me, and a lot of the time people come to me when they've been elsewhere and they're like, no, I need a breed specific approach now. And they're at a point where I was with Jasper, where you're like pulling your hair out. You've tried so much, it's not worked for whatever reason. And then they come to me and they're like, I just want a normal, quote unquote, normal dog. And I'm like, what is normal? How do you define it? And I think it's one of my like favorite things to say to my clients is, one of my clients has got an Instagram, quite a big Instagram for their dog. And if you looked at their Instagram, their dog would look like the perfect dog, because they post videos of them and photos of them out on the fells, going out into the pubs, doing all this stuff. That's actually a really reactive dog. But because of how they present that dog, he doesn't look like that. He looks like the perfect dog. And I always tell clients this, and I'm like, go look at this dog's Instagram, because his owners know that I do this. I'm like, go look at this dog's Instagram and you will see what you think is a perfect dog. If you saw that dog online, you'd go, I wish I had that dog. Now, the reality is that it's a very frustrated dog, and he has a very like small window of capacity, and he can do stuff and he can do it, and he is so much better now. But when we first started working together, he used to scream at his mum and dad because he just had all the feelings and nowhere to go with it. And it was all frustration. And he's a lot better now. And I think this is the thing that we have to realize is that saying comparison is the thief of joy. And I think that is very much relevant for dogs, because the amount of people that will come and work with me and say, I want a normal dog, or I want a dog who can do this. I'm like, why? And who says that your dog has to do that? And I think we need to start looking at actually what are our expectations on our dogs, and is it fair, and why do you have those expectations? Is it because society is telling you have to have a dog that goes to the pub, or you have to have a dog that can do this or can do that? Or is it that we actually sit back and go, well, what do I actually want from my dog? And what does my dog want as well?
I've never owned or been a guardian of a border collie. All I know about border collies is I think they are aesthetically beautiful. They are wildly intelligent, perhaps even the most intelligent breed of dogs, if I can even say that. And that's it. That's the extent of my knowledge. Oh yes, and they herd sheep.
Yes.
But I would like to understand a little bit more about them in terms of why people get them. What do you think people are looking for when they get border collies? And do you think it's a smart idea for people to do that in urban environments?
So I think when we're looking at these and who they are and what they are, like you said, every dog is individual. And if you looked at my 3 collies, they are all different and they all have their own quirks and their own things that they like and dislike. And they are inherently different, but inherently the same. And it's because there are certain traits that make them a collie. But then there are the traits that make them them. I always kind of say that we look at the environment that they were bred for originally, because a lot of the traits and characteristics that make them wildly successful as stock dogs are some of the traits that they then compete with or struggle with in urban life. So, like, for example, movement. Movement is massive for collies. We have bred them to be stimulated by it. We've bred them to be incredibly aware of it. We've inbred them to be environmentally aware. Now, that's fine when they're in a field and the only kind of movement about is the sheep. Great, fantastic. You put them into a pet home or a pet environment and there's so much movement all the time. There's cars, there's kids, there's people, there's stuff. And I think sometimes people inadvertently do harm to their collie by accident without meaning to, in terms of, I think a lot of the time people get collies and they get them from farms or they get them from really quiet rearing environments, and then they throw them in the deep end of throwing them into a busy household. They're then like, oh, well, I need to socialise because socialisation is amazing and we have to do it. And I think inadvertently people overwhelm their young collies, and then the collies are like, I'm so overstimulated, I don't know what to do, I just need some control. And then they end up creating some of these behaviours without even meaning to, or creating outlets without meaning to for some of these behaviours, if that makes sense. So when, like I said, collies are incredibly sensitive dogs and they're incredibly aware dogs. They're aware of everything before we even realise. And like you said, one of the traits that you know for them is that they're incredibly intelligent. Now, that's a good thing. It's a blessing and a curse because they're incredibly intelligent. They learn so quickly. But with that, they also learn bad things very quickly. And training isn't an event. It is something that is happening. It is a continual process. So although you may spend 5 minutes here doing a training session, 5 minutes there doing a training session, that isn't when your collie stops learning. Your collie learns the entire day. Everything you do, every habit that they're creating, everything that they're practicing is creating those neural pathways, is creating these habits, is creating these behaviours. And I think for me, a lot of the times when I'm working with collies specifically, first thing I do is strip things back. I'm like, right, stop doing that, stop doing that. Who says you have to walk your dog 3 times a day? Who says you have to do this? And we break it right down and we try and sort of get rid of some of the stress, or get rid of stuff that's going into the bucket that doesn't have to. And then what we'll then start to do is looking at, okay, well, what can they cope with? What can we give them? How can we create outlets for them? And then what we start doing is piling back in the bits that they struggle with. And I think for me, a lot of the time with collies, it's looking at actually what is it that they enjoy? What is it that we enjoy? And how can we find a happy medium? Because they don't always marry up. And sometimes there'll be something that you really want to do or you have to do because of where you live, but it's something that collie really struggles with. And it may be because of certain genetic traits or certain behaviours that come from the genes of herding, or it may be that actually they are a more sensitive dog, because like I say, they are a very sensitive breed and they just lack the confidence. So then how can we build them up and give them the skills and the capacity to do the things that they want to do in urban life? And I think collies can be fantastic pets if you go into this with a very open mind and are willing to put work in for at least 2-3 years and are very mindful of what you do with them and when you do it. And you're very aware that you are going to probably have to manage a hell of a lot in the first year to prevent behaviours occurring or deal with them when they do if you've made a mistake. Like all the problems any of my dogs have had, I can look back and go, well, that was my fault because I did that. And if I'd not done that, then that wouldn't have happened. There are, like I say, certain other things are completely out of our control, where if you're out and your dog gets attacked or something like that, it is completely out of your control. But I think a lot of the time, owners with collies, they think they have to do more and they have to give them more and do more, when actually sometimes slowing down, taking a back seat, teaching them skills like settling, learning to disengage, learning to self-regulate is actually far more important than teaching them a new trick or doing that next bit of enrichment or doing something else. So I think when you get the collies, as if you do want one, it would be looking at that side of things, of actually giving them what skills are they going to need to have to be able to cope in your environment, and how are you going to build those skills, because they won't necessarily inherently come with them. And if you're not willing to do that, it might be worth looking at a different breed.
What are some signs that border collies are frustrated or even bored?
For me, it's not an issue of boredom. It's an issue of them not learning to do nothing. So one of the things that I always, always, always instill with my young collies is I settle train. I always have and always will. Some dogs will come with it pre-programmed. You generally find collies are not those dogs. And it is a skill that they have to learn. They have to learn that sometimes they have to put up and shut up. And I think as long as you are meeting their needs, like physically, you're getting them out and they're being exercised. I think a lot of collies are under-exercised. And I don't necessarily think that they need as much as people think that they do. But 20 minutes around the block is not going to cut it for them. They are dogs that do need it. And like, I always think, like with my dogs, they do get a massive variation in how much they get. So like some days, if I'm really busy or I'm lecturing, they might get 2 half-an-hour walks at bookend of the day, just because that's what fits in with the schedule. Other days, they'll get an hour, 2 hours. And again, that does them. And they will quite happily come in and lie down for the rest of the day. They don't need 3, 4, 5 hours of exercise, but they do need to make sure you are meeting some form of exercise needs. And I think there's a lot of debate around things like ball play and things like that. And I love using tip play and using it to draw out some of their behaviours. So I use it to do urban herding, which is where they essentially herd balls, and you teach them to do all of their herdy behaviours using balls. Or you can do a variation of it with flirt poles, which I call predatory play, because it's kind of giving them opportunity to do bits of their predatory sequence through play, which is a really useful thing. And again, it doesn't have to be that structured. If you only have 5 minutes and you don't have the time or the skills to have built that game, doing a little bit of like ball flinging, tiny small amounts, isn't the end of the world. It is better that your dog has a little bit of joy and a decent amount of exercise than they get nothing, if that makes sense. And it shouldn't be all or nothing. I think doing little bits of it every now and again isn't the worst thing. Doing it for every day for 20 minutes straight, yeah, not great. It's going to damage the joints. It's just relentless and mindless. But doing little bits of it, if you've got no other option and you need to get them out, again, isn't the worst thing. I think it's doing things in moderation with things like that. But for me, if you can, rather than doing the ball flinging, teach them to herd that ball, teach them to move like a collie moves, teach them to give them opportunity to do the behaviours they were bred for. Or, like I say, sometimes another great thing to do with collies who you think are struggling with boredom, and you can do it in the house, you don't have to go out of the house, is you can do scent work. And it could be really rough and ready scent work for them. So it could be as simple as like hiding food around the house, or it could be starting and hiding like a tennis ball. Most collies that I work with, they've played ball with them, and they are really ball driven. So use that as an advantage, but flip it on its head a little bit. See, for my eldest, who has a lot of the hip problems, she is obsessed with balls. She always has been. It's her favourite thing. And we still use balls with her, but we do a lot of searching for them. So what we'll do is when she's out and about, we'll either do a fake throw or she'll disappear off. I'll put it in a bush, put it in a wall, and I'll go, Aoife, where's your ball? Instantly switches on and she gets to sit, hunt and search for it. Now that's my way of mentally enriching her, because she physically can't do as much, and giving her the thing that she loves, her tennis ball, in one game without damaging her further or creating more stress on her joints. So I think sometimes with these dogs, we don't need to buy loads of fancy toys or do anything. Sometimes it's being creative with what you have, or looking at what you have already and how you're using it. So it could be that you have a tennis ball and you do the games, the urban herding and things like that with them, or you do the tennis ball and you do scent work with them. It's something that gets that brain working a little bit more than just mindless games, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. Do you find it with people who come to you that they understand that enrichment is important, if not more important than walking the dog?
I think it's a really loaded question, because some dogs need enrichment because the environment that they live in is not ideal, in terms of there's just too much going on. They are not in the right home. But then you can't always rehome dogs like that because of their history. So they're kind of stuck and the owners are stuck. And I think for those dogs, enrichment is amazing. But then I also find that I have some clients who the dogs don't do any enrichment, but they have a very fulfilled life. It's not a case of do it or don't do it. I think it's sometimes looking at the dog and the whole picture. But I generally find for a lot of my dogs who I'm working with that are like got behavior problems and things like that, enrichment is huge for them because they can't live a normal life. They can't just go out and be off lead and be free and have that social interaction, have all the things that a dog would need to have a fully fulfilled life. So I think we do use things like enrichment to support that because for whatever reason, they struggle with the world. And like Jasper was very much one of those dogs. And you could always tell the days when we'd done the urban herding and hadn't. The days we had done the urban herding, he was a much happier, much calmer dog. He had so much more capacity to cope with things. And we actually ended up using that as his first step for his reactivity. So we taught him the games. He loved it, absolutely loved it. We started going into busier spaces and going, right, that's there, but you're working with me. You're doing this game. And he could work and do his job around the triggers. We then started to pull it back. So we'd do a bit of his game. We'd then put it away. He'd have to do some of the training with me. And then when I started to notice his bucket getting full, his arousal lifting, his reactivity starting to kind of the early warning signs, we'd then bring the game back out. And it was like just taking the pin out of a balloon. It was just all the air used to just leave him and he'd relax into it. And then it'd give us more time to help him reset so that we could do more training. And eventually the games got smaller and his training sessions got longer. And we got to the point where he could just go into those environments, do all the training, and then at the end we'd play rather than having to use it to get him in. And I've done it successfully with quite a few clients since then, where these are for like the dogs that are really, really quick, really reactive, really they're on the more extreme end of reactivity, and it's worked really quite well. But it is a long process, and it isn't just a quick fix.
Of the dogs that have come to you, how many roughly have presented health or pain issues when it comes to showing reactivity?
I would say a significant amount. I would say you'd be looking at like 60%, 60-ish, maybe a little bit more. I think a lot of the time we misread discomfort in dogs. And even like little niggly bits of pain, we often will be like, oh, well, they've got minor hip dysplasia, but it's not enough to cause them pain. But who are we to say that, and how do we know that? I think it's different and it's relative. So like Eve has lived in chronic pain her entire life. And if she's telling me she's in pain, I know she's in a hell of a lot of pain because she's always lived in it, if that makes sense. So when she starts limping or something, I'm like, you must be sore because you are constantly sore. Whereas like if it was Enzo's the biggest baby going, and he gets like the teeniest, tiniest thing in his paw, and he's like, "Mother, help! I can't possibly." And it is a little bit relative, and I think it comes down to you knowing your dog. But a lot of the time we misread it, and it comes out as behaviour, and it's not. Like recently, I was working with a quite a reactive dog, and it turned out he's got compressed discs and hip dysplasia, and he was out running doing 2 hours of exercise every day. And the signs were he was sound sensitive and really reactive. But you saw him out running, and I noticed it when we were out running. He turned his knee, and I was like, something not quite right there. So I sent him back, and it turns out he's got slip discs and hip dysplasia. And the sign was his knee
Oh,
would twist out when he was walking. You didn't notice it when he was running or trotting, but when he walked, his knee used to twist out just very slightly. And that was the only sign that you saw, apart from his behaviour physically. But it was so subtle, the owner didn't notice.
some dogs are really good at hiding it. They have a high tolerance for pain.
100%.
I don't know if you can see. Can you see my dog?
No.
Hey, Tuna. Can you see her? So she's where is she now? Tuna. She's a Spanish Greyhound. She's a Galga.
Oh, there she is.
But yeah, so I started fostering her, and I thought she was fine. And then one day when I was walking with her, she was running across the field in front of me, and I was like, her gait's off ever so slightly. Her back, like it's almost like she does a double hop every 3 paces. So I recorded it and I sent it to a friend of mine. I was like, do you see what I see? So I then took her to the vet, and the vet was like, she must be really sore after observing her. And I was like, my goodness, I would never have known if I didn't pay attention to such a micro movement. And I think because I'm a one person household, I do have more time than the average person who's got a family to run and
Yeah.
who doesn't work at home. And so you've got that like life distraction taking you away from having all the time in the world to observe your dog, really. So it's so easy to miss these things, isn't it?
Yeah, and like I generally, if I'm working with behaviour, I always want the vet to send me the notes, give me the details, to see the dog and just give them a quick once over and check that there's nothing wrong, like immediately screamingly obviously wrong. And then I also work quite closely with physios because I think so a lot of my clients, they struggle in the vets and they for whatever reason, it's traumatic for them. And 9 times out of 10, the vet doesn't get a proper reading on the dog because the dog goes in very tense, very stressed. They don't behave how they would normally. They can be more aggressive as a defense mechanism, or they don't respond to pain in the same way because they're in like fight or flight self-preservation mode. So a lot of the time, if I find that we get pushback from vets, or the vet's like, well, I can't see anything screamingly obvious, I'll then send clients to a physio. There's some fantastic ones near us. And the beautiful thing about physios is that dogs are generally a little bit more relaxed because they're there for, rather than 5-10 minutes, they're there for an hour. And physios can do assessments without getting hands-on. And decent physios will spend the time to let the dog get used to them and be relaxed throughout the treatment so they can get a more true reading, I find, of the dogs. And like I've had a few of my clients who do struggle in the vets who have gone to physio, and the physio's then gone, that's like there is the problem, and then we'll send it back to the vet for the vet to then do x-rays and things like that. Because, and I think sometimes with dogs, like a multifaceted approach, like doing lots of, like seeing lots of different people and looking at it from that approach is where you'll get your diagnosis, if that makes sense. And a lot of the time physios are cheaper or the same price as a vet appointment. Like I know my physio is that I go to with Aoife is cheaper than going to a consultation with my vet. So like if there's something with Aoife, I will go and I'm like, can you just see that? Is it worth me going to the vet with? And then she'll go, no, it's just a soft tissue injury. She'll recover, just rest her. Or yeah, send her back. And then we do it like that. Because she goes to the physio every 2 weeks anyway. So she's already going 9 times out of 10.
Have you heard of myotherapy?
No.
Oh, you haven't? Oh, okay. My understanding of it is it's kind of like a myofascia.
Yeah. So it's the massage techniques. The reason I've got the physio I have now is I went to do an owner's massage day with Aoife to try and give myself the skills to give her little massages to try and help her be more comfortable. And we were there, and the lady who was running it, Lisa, who owns the Canine Physio UK, she literally came out and put hands on Aoife for like 5 minutes and was like, she's got tight hip flexors. And I went, oh no, it's normally the back of her leg. Like all the physios we've been to, it's her back and the back of her leg that gets really tight. She went, no, feel this. Put my thumb on it. It was rock solid. I was like, oh. And she was like, yeah, you need to do this, and these. And she gave me loads of advice. And I was like, all right. So I ended up going to her practice, and she's got a treadmill, and she said, you need to get on a treadmill. She doesn't have the strength to move her leg forward properly. She's weak and tense in that bit. And like I said, she literally put her hands on her and diagnosed within like 5 minutes. I was so impressed. But that was a lot of the stuff she was doing was like myofascial stuff. So I know vaguely what you're on about, but I've not heard of that specific.
The Gallen type, yeah. What is it that you do? I know that you've got the urban herd, by the sounds of it, is doing exceptionally well. And I heard you mention that you lecture earlier in our conversations.
Graduated in 2022. I run a couple of businesses, and I then got a job lecturing at a local college. I've since done my PGCE, level 7 PGCE, so qualified lecturer, teacher, whatever you want to call it. My plan is actually...
What do you teach?
We teach animal care, so it's more of a broad entry level sort of into the industry more than anything. So yeah, I teach that. I'm a course lead for early college transfers, which are basically homeschooled kids that have, for whatever reason, struggled in mainstream education. And it's a program to try and get them back in using animal care. Which it was not what I was expecting when I first joined, and it's somehow where I've ended up, but I actually really enjoy it. A lot of the kids have got neurodiversity. I got my diagnosis of ADHD last year, which makes a lot of sense as to why I enjoy working with them so much. But it's also like opened my eyes a lot with my approach to training and how we can facilitate and make it more accessible to people. I'm currently in the process of transitioning the business a little bit more to be able to help more people and it to become, again, more accessible to people, because I think in this day and age, obviously cost of living crisis, everything is expensive. And what I don't want is for it to become difficult for people. So I'm trying to sort of build my online membership, which is a more affordable way to access me and access my training and basically help your collie without having to spend hundreds and hundreds of pounds. And I'm in the process at the moment of developing a pilot reactivity online program, which you can either, I'm hoping we're running it live at the moment, but what we might then do is release it as a self-paced thing where you get all the recordings and all the material for less. And people can then access all the materials and hopefully do the training with their collies. And that's kind of what I'm working towards.
Very interesting about your membership platform, and also making access to you more scalable but also more accessible is really good, because it takes away the shame that some people feel. Some people, from the conversations that I've had, do feel shame to reach out to trainers or behaviorists to help them with problems. It's almost seen as a personal failure.
I always find that really bizarre, because I have never met a single client who wasn't trying their best, and the fact that they are seeking help for me is them showing effort and willing to do the best for their dog. Like I say, a lot of the time with reactivity and things like that, we've got these dogs that are very specialist, and although we inadvertently might contribute elements to their reactivity by not recognizing early signs or not supporting them when they need it, and then them having to resort to it because they feel so worried or so frightened or so anxious or so frustrated, it isn't the owner's fault, even if that happened, because you don't know what you don't know. And a lot of the time you don't realize it's happened until it's too late. And then, like I said, there's so many things that I've done with my dogs where I've gone, oh, I wish I didn't do that, or I wish that never happened, or I wish I didn't start doing that with them, because you don't realize at the time how little things like that actually can result in huge problems later down the line. And I think, like I said, I've never met a client that wasn't trying their best and wasn't trying to do the best for their dog and give their dog the best life possible in whatever shape or form that may look like. And I think there should be no shame, and it isn't like, if you have got a reactive dog, it isn't a failure on your behalf. It is generally a combination of so many different factors that are completely out of your control. Like you said earlier, things like genetics, so the breed, not only the breed, but the lines, so the parents, the grandparents, where they come from. You've then got what happened in utero, so when the mum was pregnant, how that then contributes to how the puppies deal with stress, how the puppies develop, things like that. You've got the first 8 weeks with the breeder, which is so fundamental and so crucial and often wildly overlooked. And again, this all happens before the dog even gets picked up. You've then got that puppy that has already got a little bit of a personality. It's got who they are. It's not a clean slate going into homes. And then we have things that happen out of our control. A lot of clients I've worked with in the past who struggle massively with reactivity of frustration is that they've had an injury and end up being created because of said injury. And that's just driven them insane, because they haven't coped well with it. And then that has, on the back end of it, resulted in reactivity. And that's completely out of the owner's control. There's nothing they could have done. They had to create the dog for its physical well-being, but to the detriment of it then missing weeks, months of training and opportunity, and it then comes out and can't cope with things. You have dogs that get attacked. You have dogs that have things happen to them that is completely out of their control. With Piper, she started carching because she was having a phantom, and we walked past a bus and a bus released its air brakes, and she completely...
Sorry, what is a phantom?
A phantom pregnancy. So basically, her body tells her she's pregnant, even though she's not. So it happens after a season, and basically it's the body says, you're pregnant, and will start to give them lots of hormones. They might start to lactate. So sometimes you'll have clinical signs, which are like physical signs, like lactation, mammary development. They get little boobs and things like that. Or you have behavioural signs, and you can have some dogs that will become quite aggressive. They become resource guardy, they become really fearful, they become really sensitive. Sometimes you have like they become obsessive over toys, they start to mother, things like that. It can look different in different bitches. With Piper, she started to resource guard, she became very fearful. She started with a little bit of dog reactivity, and she started car chasing because of this bus. And again, completely hormonal, completely out of our control. And I find a lot of collies can be very hormonal, whether it's a bitch or a dog. I do find that they seem to feel things in bigger quantities than other dogs, and that hormones do have a massive part to play in it. And I think it often gets overlooked, and people put it down to, oh, well, it's just an adolescent, or it's just a collie. And I'm like, well, actually, no, if you look at it, they're in a really difficult developmental phase. They've just got a whole influx of hormones and they don't know what to do with it. And that's then on us. And this is what I was saying earlier about, if you're getting these dogs, you have to be willing to put the time in. And it's not like 6 months when you first get them, it's 2 years, 3 years. I generally say when a collie's about 3 or 4, that's when you kind of have a solid dog. And there's a famous farmer's saying of, you want a year under each paw before you have a decent work dog. So a year under each paw for a 4-year-old and you have a decent work dog. And I kind of find that true. All of my dogs, once they hit sort of 3 or 4, that's when I'm like, yeah, do you know what? You're getting good now. And Enzo's, he'll be 3.5 now, and he's just at the point where I'm like, you're actually quite a good boy now. And I'm really pleased with him. But a year and a half ago, I was ready to throw him in the bin. I'd had enough. He was doing my head in. And I think it's important that people realise that it does happen. All my dogs, I've gone through the stage in adolescence when I've gone, why did I get another dog? Why have I done this to myself? I've just made my life really hard and it was really easy before.
Yeah, because there's 3 dogs, and one out of the 3 dogs has quite severe physical limitations. So yeah, why did you? Like, wow. Actually, this is a genuine question. Why do you have dogs?
I've always had dogs. I got given, so my mum grew up in the farm. She's always had dogs. And I got given my first dog. In fact, I've got a photo of him here. This is Bob. He is a Cairn Terrier. That's me with Bob. I got given my first dog when I was 4 from my uncle. He was a failed farm dog because I was 3, and he was given to me as company for when my sister went to school. And Bob was the love of my life. He was just a giant potato of a dog. He was very round and very fat, and he tolerated everything. He was amazing. And then when he died, we got Willow, who was a black lab, and she was just a gut bucket. She ate everything, absolutely everything. And I think I've always had dogs, and for me, I've always had a really special connection with them, and I just absolutely adore them. They are just wonderful little souls, and they bring so much joy and so much extra to your life that when we came back from traveling, I missed my family, and I was like, I really want to come home. But I was like, if we're coming home, I was like, I am getting a dog. I was like, that is it, non-negotiable. I'm having one. I've always wanted my own, and we got Aoife. And then Aoife's Aoife. Aoife is the naughtiest dog I will ever own, but also really well behaved. She does little things where you think, you're just being naughty now, but it's not naughty enough for you to go, up, that's a naughty dog. But it's just little bits where you've got Aoife sit and she's like, no. Or Aoife come and she'll come but stay like just far enough away. You're like, but she's not actually naughty. It doesn't impact your life, anything. But it's always that little bit of rebellion, which I absolutely love about her. And like I said, I always say she's the naughtiest dog I'll ever own, but she's the funniest, happiest dog you'll ever meet. And then she struggled when we left home and bought our own place. She really struggled with the transition of being in a multi-dog household to moving to it by herself. And she had a lot of isolation distress. So she could cope being left with other dogs, but she struggled by herself. So that's when we were like, right, we'll get another dog. I wanted another dog to train with. That's when we got Jasper. Obviously, we lost Jasper when he was very young to epilepsy. And I was adamant, I'm not getting another collie. I'm done with collies. And I was looking at golden retrievers because I was like, I need something different. And then somehow ended up getting yet another collie. And that's where we got Piper. But I researched everything, looked on all the epilepsy database. She was from fully health tested parents. I knew the lines. I was really careful with it. And I'd always wanted to breed. So we bred Piper because I was contemplating keeping one back. We were going to do this litter and then potentially have another and keep one later down the line to replace Aoife. But unfortunately, Piper had quite a difficult birth and she ended up with a C-section, and I was like, that's it, never breeding again. I'm not putting her at risk. So we ended up keeping Enzo because I couldn't get rid of him. And he was a very special little boy, and I ended up like hand rearing the pups, and it worked out as we ended up keeping him. So that's how I ended up with 3, and it's not easy. And because we're planning to go away and travel and take the dogs with us, I've now been putting lots of time and effort into working to getting them out as a trio into busy spaces. And that's my current training aim with them, is getting them out and getting them used to doing things as a trio, behaving politely in public, and just because a lot of the stuff that we do, I live on back of the Pennines, so I love walking on open moorland and they can be as free and feral as they like, and they're fantastic. But towns and stuff isn't something that we do take them to, but it's something that I know they're going to have a lot more of. So I'm now filtering that into their everyday life now, so that when we do go, it isn't such a shock that they then go, holy hell, I'm not coping. So this is one of the things, like I say, it's looking at your dog and your lifestyle and thinking, okay, well, where's it going to go? And that's what I've done. And now I'm trying to create the skills and their ability to do it in that environment before we put them into it, is my plan at the moment.
Yeah, that's really cool. Very thoughtful that you have that foresight to pre-plan and set them up for success. I wish you a lot of success with that. So I started a new format as of yesterday, and I quite like it. It's a bit fun. It's a quick fire round of questions. Are you up for it?
Yeah.
Okay, ready. So, quick fire round. What is a book, a course, a movie, or a podcast about dogs that you have loved and would recommend?
The Farmer's Dog by John. Ooh, who's it by? It's a very old book, and it's about collies, and it's about like the traditional way of life of farming and collies. And it's one of the first books I ever read about them. And it's called The Farmer's Dog. It's by John somebody. I will find it and I'll send it. Yeah, it's a very beautifully written book, and it's very kind of like romanticized a little bit. But it's very true, and it tells you who they are and what they are, and I love that.
What is the first dog that you remember clearly, and what did they teach you without trying to teach you?
It would be Bracken. So that was my mum's first dog. And the thing he taught you was that dogs have boundaries. He was a little Cairn Terrier, and he used to growl when he was happy, and he growled when he was sad. And if he growled, we were told we had to stop, and mum would come in and go, it's a happy growl, he's okay, or move away. And so that he taught me that dogs have boundaries and to respect them.
That's awesome. I love that. What is one everyday behavior in dogs that humans consistently misunderstand?
I would say self-regulation. People, like I say, I think a lot of dogs struggle with this. A lot of young collies struggle with this. And a lot of people think that if they train like tricks or they train behaviors, they'll get it. And I think actually it's scraping it back and looking at the day-to-day in the house, how well they regulate themselves, and how we can teach that, and how beneficial it can be for a dog to learn to self-regulate is often overlooked. So self-regulation is, for me, it is the dog's capacity to learn to bring themselves down. So I started quite a lot as a young pup doing like settle training. So can they learn to come into the room and settle? I'll do bits with it with play. Can they go from playing to not playing, and that transition, and how well can they do that without me having to over engineer it? And it's that emotional regulation for me. It's that teaching them to go from up here to down here, and how they cope with it, and how do they do it, and how do they create strategies to help themselves do it.
That's cool. Do you find that, and this is slightly off topic, but do you find that it's easier to do that early on or harder to do that later on? Like depending on when obviously the dog comes into your care, because I'm just thinking, what if people get a rescue dog, for example, and this is not to stereotype all rescue dogs because all dogs are individual, but hypothetically speaking, if you get a dog within not able to self-regulate, is that something you can teach later on?
Yes, it is something you can teach. It's something that you can work on. Inherently, it comes down to the dog itself. Some dogs are really good at it. Like naturally, they can do it. It comes well. I've worked with some collies that come home at like 8-10 weeks, and they really struggle at it at that age. It's not necessarily an age thing. It sometimes comes down to who they are a little bit more. And like I've worked with some like rescue collies that are fantastic at it, and they have other issues that we're dealing with, but actually they can cope with certain stuff, and they can bring themselves up and bring themselves down. Age is actually on their side for things like that. And then I've worked with some like really young pups that get themselves sky high super quick, and they end up biting and attacking their own, like attacking, when I say attacking, like play biting at the ankles and things like that, because they've got themselves up and they have nowhere to go with it. So I think it's a case by case, and it's more to do with the individual dog rather than an age.
What is a belief about dogs that you once held that you no longer agree with?
Oh gosh, what is a belief about dogs that you once held that you no longer? Oh, I couldn't think. I'm trying to think what have I believed in the past that I don't believe anymore.
It could be ideas about border collies specifically, or just the dogs in general. Like I used to believe that, like for example, that you.
No, go on.
No, you go ahead. Go on. I was just trying to stimulate an idea.
The belief that even if the dog's in the wrong home, that there's a better home out there for them. I think People always go, oh, well, they'd be better in a different home. And I think the realistic thing about that is it isn't necessarily always true, because this hypothetical better home doesn't always exist, because people are unwilling to take dogs like that, or dogs, the home that that dog needs is so specific and so niche that there isn't people with that home looking for a dog. Or if they are, they're not looking for a dog like that, if that makes sense. And I think sometimes dogs, even if the environment itself is really difficult and really overstimulating for the dog, having an owner that is willing to put the time, effort, and practice what they're trying to do with the dog is much better than just saying you'd be better in a different home and getting rid of them. If you've got an owner that is actually willing to put the time and effort into their dog and meet them halfway with certain things, I think you can end up finding that to be a better balance than going, oh, I need to find a better home. So I do think that sometimes it is a case of there are totally unsuitable homes and there is better homes. Like one of our dogs, she's sprung a poo. She was a client's dog and she was in the wrong home. And they were really struggling with her. And I said, let me have her. I was like, I'll have her, give her here. And we've had her now 6 years. And she is my stooge dog. And she's helped hundreds, if not thousands, of collies to learn to be social or to build their social skills. And so I think there are homes out there, but I don't think they're as readily available as people believe.
People are going to buy border collies regardless. But do you think that it's in the dog's best interest to live in an urban environment?
I think that for some dogs, yes. I think some collies thrive in a pet home or in an urban environment. I think some dogs don't. But I also think there's a misconception that they would be happier on the farm. In terms of the realities of farm life doesn't necessarily always suit every dog. Like, for example, my two go and stay. My friend, she farms up in North Yorkshire. And if we go on holiday, I send them on sheepdog holidays and they go up there because we do our sheepdog training with her. And they love it. They thrive off it. However, Aoife would not cope in that environment. Aoife would find living in a kennel with lots of other dogs barking around her inherently stressful. She would not cope. She wouldn't be able to work, which means she would be limited. And I don't think that it is, and one's better than the other. I think certain dogs are suited to different environments because of, like I say, just where they've come from, what they've done, etc., etc., etc. But I don't necessarily think it's a blanket yes or no of some dogs, urban homes are bad or urban homes are good. I think it is what you do with the dog that you have and how you support them.
What is a question about dogs that you think more people should be asking?
I would be looking at what are people asking when they're getting their dogs. So a lot of people are going to get dogs regardless. What I would be starting to look at is they need to be looking at what questions they're asking their breeders, because by the time the puppy gets to you, they've already had so much input into who they are and what they are. And for me, it would be a case of not asking about dogs, it's asking where your dogs come from and what input they've had up until that point. And that would be stuff that I would be asking. So I'd be asking about the parents, not only the parents, but the grandparents. What are they like? How do they behave in different situations? And think about your life and ask them about how those dogs would cope with certain things that you do in your life. So if you're massively into running, how does your dog cope with being around other people and fast-moving runners or bikers? If you have quite a busy social life, how does your dog cope around people? How are they with strangers? How are they with children? I would then ask, like, well, what have you done? Where was the bitch kept while she was pregnant? What have you done with the puppies? What have you put into them? What socialization have you done with them? Have they been handled regularly? And how much time do they get with people on a regular basis? Because a lot of the time when collies are bred on farms, the farmer will go in and feed them and clean them out and stuff, and then they'll leave them again. They'll go in and feed them, clean them out, leave them again. The only time they ever see people in those first few weeks is it's all exciting, everything's happening, it's busy, it's da 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 da. And then the people go away. So it turns it into this black and white. People are exciting. When people aren't there, we rest. You then put them in a home where people are around all the time and you've got a dog that's buzzed. So it would be a case of not asking questions about dogs. It would be asking your breeders the question as to whether that specific puppy from that litter is suitable for you.
What brings you the most joy when you are with dogs?
Seeing their joy. So, like, it looks different in different dogs, but I have a real joy when a dog is like fully relaxed and they're like rolling on their back in grass or on snow or something where you can just see them happy and doing something for the joy of it rather than because they've been told to or they want to. I really enjoy seeing dogs be happy and relaxed, and like Aoife does it when she lies on her back and she sleeps with her feet in the air. I love it because it's just a happy, relaxed dog. And it brings me joy.
Yeah, it's beautiful when dogs are dogs.
Yeah.
Right, let's see. If you had a magic wand that could change one thing about the dog world in an instant, what would it be and why?
I would change it from being so polarized. Dog training's a spectrum. And I think you have people on either end of it, but they seem to be the people that are shouting loudest. And I think for me, dog training is somewhere in the middle. It is a case of I'm not going to be harming, I'm not going to be horrible to my dog. I'm not doing that. However, I do have boundaries and I do have consistency. And if my dog's being naughty, or in Enzo's case, he's a bit of a yobbo, and he's being a bit of a yobbo, he will get told to stop. But like I said, I'm not forceful, I'm not hitting, I'm not violent, I'm not anything like that. But I think for me, the one thing I would change is this real polarized attitude of, well, dogs must obey, we must do this, and they will do this, or we can't tell them no, we can't do anything. I just think it doesn't actually help the dogs at the end of the day. I think we need to have a well-rounded approach to it, and we need to be mindful that they are sentient beings, and underneath it there is a little person, but also that they do need to have boundaries and they do need to have consistency and systems in place to make sure that they are a well-behaved citizen, so that they're not getting themselves in bother.
Citizen, I love that. Right, so final question for you. What gives you hope about the future of interspecies living?
People are becoming more and more aware of dogs' needs, and the fact that there is different approaches, and the fact that actually underneath it all they have a little mammalian brain. They still have feelings, they still have thoughts, they still have a personality. And I think one thing that has really moved forward is how we treat our dogs now. Some people say we go too far and we baby them, and there are people who do that. At the end of the day, they are a dog. But I think people are becoming more aware of different dogs' needs, different breed needs, and they're trying their best to facilitate that. And that for me is beautiful, because the amount of my clients that are creating opportunities to herd with their collies, even though they live in a completely pet home, and getting opportunity to see those dogs do what they were bred for, even if it doesn't look quite right because there's no sheep, for me is a really beautiful thing. And I think it's really nice that there is more and more people actively seeking out ways to make their dogs happier and to be more mindful of their well-being.
It also helps having people like you in the dog world because firstly, you are extremely articulate. Like, it makes dog training and information more accessible. So when people are that warm, that friendly, and that articulate and able to distill complex information in a way that regular people like myself can understand, it makes a huge difference, and it makes being a good dog guardian much more accessible.
Obviously, it's my job. I have to earn money doing it. But I think this is why I wanted to set up the communities. And I'm hoping that once we've done the Calm Collie method online, like live reactivity stuff, it is something that I'll be able to offer for people who can't afford to do it live, so that they're still able to access that information and they're still able to help their dogs. Because I'm very well aware that, like I said, these people are struggling at the moment, and it's really unfortunate, and it shouldn't be the case. But there are still people out there who have dogs and are feeling at their wits' end. And at the end of the day, if I can help even a few collies, and just to feel happier and more able to cope in the world, then I'm doing my job right. And that's what I'm hoping we can do.
Yeah, and keep them out of the kennels, out of rescues, and make sure that their guardians have the skills to be able to help them to thrive. I am very, very, very glad that you came onto the podcast. Thank you so much for your time and generosity. I wish you all the best, and also with your future projects.
Thank you very much. See you later.